It's hard enough to breathe when we don't have smoke caught in the lungs, you see. We can hardly see. Should we tell someone, or are the clouds above asleep? You caught me at a bad time, a little too much to drink. I'm a little top heavy, but a little too sober to think.
Color correction and color grading are two of those things that if you haven't been walked hand in hand through the harsh wasteland that is Lumetri Color in Premiere Pro, like if you haven't been talked through how to actually go about it or what everything does or where to even start, it can be incredibly overwhelming and often too overwhelming to even begin doing it. So hopefully after today's video, you'll at least be at a position where you can begin to experiment within Premiere Pro's Lumetri Color panel. First things first, I need to teach you the difference between color correction and color grading, because yes, those are two completely different processes with two completely different goals. Color correction is the process of bringing your footage back to a more natural position by balancing out your exposure, contrast, color temperature, color tint, and color saturation. It can be used for two purposes. The first purpose is to fix the mistakes that you make whilst out shooting. Say for example, if your white balance is a little bit off and you need to bring that back to a more natural state, or say for example, if your exposure is completely off, say it's too overexposed or too underexposed, you can do your best in this process to try and bring it back to a more usable position. And the second is to bring log footage back to a more natural look. Say for example, with drone footage, DJI log or D-log is a very, very flat picture profile, and specifically today the Mavic 2 Pro D-Log M is a extremely flat picture profile, so you need to know how to bring that footage back to a more natural look before you can begin to add a stylized look onto your footage. And that's where color grading comes into it, because color grading is where you then go in and you add your stylized look and feel to your footage. Things like teal and orange, warmer tones, desaturated look, that cinema look, all of that sort of stuff is done in the color grading process. That's why it's extremely important to try and have your image as well balanced as possible straight out of camera, because the less that you have to do in the color correction process, the more room you're going to have to move your footage during the color grading process. For example, with this image right here, this is what it looks like straight out of camera, and this is what it looks like adding to the image. Straight out of camera, I try to keep it well balanced. I try to do a little bit of in-camera color grading with the light behind me, and then I also try to keep it nice and well balanced as far as my white balance, so after the fact I don't have too much to do on the color correction phase and I can focus on color grading. This is all personal preference. This is my workflow. I'm entirely self-taught, so if you know a better way to do this or you've seen a better tutorial, I'm all ears. I'm willing to listen, but this is how I color grade all my footage. So if you've ever liked any of my footage, if you've ever liked the way I do anything, or if you've ever liked any of my videos, then this video is going to go through how I go about doing that. So without further ado, let's jump into my computer. Alright, so there's two clips that I'm going to be color grading today to hopefully give you guys two different examples from two completely different environments that you can begin to, implement into your own editing style. The first clip is this waterfall clip from Waimea Falls. I believe it's Waimea Falls in Kauai, Hawaii. This was shot last year in November when Georgie and I went to Hawaii. And the second clip is from January this year from Hymes Beach. I wanted to pick a beach shot and then a waterfall shot because I think that covers a large majority of the drone content that I shoot on a regular basis. I often shoot in the woods, in sort of wooded natural areas, or I shoot at the beach. So hopefully after you watch these two clips or watch me color grade these two examples of two different clips, you'll be able to go and color grade 90% of your drone footage if you're anything like me. But if not, hopefully it'll give you some of the basics that you can begin to implement into other examples of clip. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the end result. So this is the before and this is the after. And just to make sure that we're doing this from scratch and I'm teaching you everything I know, I'm going to go over to the effects control and I'm going to delete the Lumetri color correction. Now the first thing I'm going to do for this example, I'm going to add a utilities LUT to bring this footage back to a natural position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the creative section. For this particular image, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the look. I'm going to hit this option here. I'm going to go to browse and I'm going to find the LUT that I want to use for this specific video. This is a LUT that I have available in my Cinematic LUT Pack V1 that'll be linked down in the description below. I'm going to click on this here. Already, as you can see, that's transformed this image into a much more natural looking image. If I go here, before and after. Now you're probably wondering, Tom, this seems like this LUT was perfect for this image. That's because it's a LUT specifically designed for DJI drone log footage. And this footage was shot D-Log-M on the Mavic 2 Pro. So it's a LUT that's specifically designed to tackle images like this. It's also, like I mentioned, a very well exposed image. So the LUT is going to do exactly what its purpose is. From here, I'm going to turn this back on and I'm going to actually increase it a little bit more because I like the way it's adding some contrast. And then I'm going to go over here to my curves panel and I'm going to bring the exposure just down slightly to add a little bit more mood. And then I'm going to go over to the tint and I'm going to add a little bit of magenta just to add a little bit more color separation between those greens and the rock face. Maybe a little bit of warmth. Nice, just a little bit less. About there is perfect. And that is the color correction phase of the image done. From here, maybe I'll add a little bit of saturation, just a tiny little bit because the LUT has already added quite a bit of that saturation back. And then from here, we can go into the color grading phase. So from here, I'm gonna go to my curves. I'm gonna go down to the hue and hue curve, and I'm going to add a couple of dots along the green line. From here, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to play around with these to add a little bit more separation between these colors. You'll notice as I move them up on the green axis, those greens go a little bit warmer and get a little bit deeper. I actually like the color of the deep greens, but I want to add a little bit more separation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring these down slightly as well, and then maybe bring these up a little bit more. I'm going to add another dot here and I'm going to bring that up, and you'll notice just tiny little changes on the curves line, but if I turn this off and on, you can see the difference is just adding a little bit more pop to those greens. I'm actually going to bring a little bit more in, and there we go. I think this image is exactly where I wanted it. If I go to the little effects panel here, I'm going to hit the before and after, and you can see just how much of a substantial difference that has made to the image. It's well balanced, it's well exposed, the colors look nice, everything looks good. The second clip I'm going to handle today is this clip here. This is the before image. Now this was quite a foggy day to begin with, so the image was already flat to begin with, and then on top of that it's shot again in D-Log-M, so it's a very desaturated flat image. So the first thing I want to do before I do anything is add some of that saturation back into the image to help me to actually recognize where I need to add some color, because right now I can't tell what the color balance is looking like because it's so desaturated. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this saturation line, I'm going to pull that up to about 165, I think is going to be good. Maybe a little bit more, 170. And you'll notice now I can start to see a little bit of a difference between the images, and from there I've actually noticed that it's a little bit cool. So I'm going to grab this and warm it up just a tiny little bit, maybe a little bit of magenta. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to my curves, I'm going to bring those shadows down and then bring those highlights up a little bit more. And there, that has already added quite a nice amount of contrast back into the image. From here, what I can do is I can play around with the colors. I can maybe add a little bit of vibrance to the image. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to my color wheels and I'm going to add a little bit of warmth into the midtones just to make this area and this area up here pop a little bit more. And then I'm going to add a little bit of cool tones into the highlights just to separate those two a little bit more. And you'll notice how that's taken that image. If I turn that off, it's subtle, but that looks quite flat with a nice blue haze over the image. As soon as I turn that on, it adds a little bit more color contrast into the image and makes it stand out a little bit more. This is a good way that you can add a little bit of that teal and orange look into the image. And to finish it off, I'm just going to bring these midtones down slightly just to add a little bit more contrast into those shadows. And there you go. If I go up to the top, effects off, effects on, that is how I color grade this image. From here, you can go up here, play around with the basic controls panel, do whatever you want, but that's about it for this image. You probably notice straight away that it's very subtle. The changes aren't extreme, and that's because color grading, like I mentioned, unless you're shooting raw, there's not as much leeway to move your footage. My goal whenever I'm color grading footage is always just to make it look as natural and pleasing to the eye as possible. I'm never really trying to over stylize my image or make something out of nothing. I'm always just trying to bring my images back to where I want them. Now, there are some pretty cool things that you can do to your image. If I go over here to this clip and I duplicate this clip, I'm going to go down here, I'm going to add an adjustment layer. I'm going to drag this over the top of this clip, and in this adjustment layer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my LUT that I just used before, just to bring it back to a usable point. And then in the actual clip, I'm going to go to here, I'm going to browse, and I'm going to find my infrared LUT. And what this does is this adds a very, very stylized look to this clip, but it is a very, very cool clip. Now, this isn't my LUT, this is a LUT that's designed by someone else, but it is an option that I'll leave in the description below alongside my own LUTs. Now, this is not for everyone, but it does leave a little bit of a cool look on your footage, and it can be something that can be extremely eye-catching for your videos. If you're scrolling through a video and suddenly there's this image here, that's something cool that you're not going to see very often. Something different, it's something that you don't see very often, and it's something that, you know, you might be able to use for certain circumstances. So there's a lot of cool things that you can do with color grading, but 9 times out of 10, if you just concentrate on making your images look natural, that's going to produce the best results. So yeah, that is how I color grade my footage, and a little bit on how you can get a really stylized look for your footage. Like I mentioned, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of LUT packs that you can buy online, but I heavily encourage you to actually learn how to color grade your footage yourself so you can begin to learn how to actually use these LUTs and how to use them well. There's a difference between slapping a LUT onto your footage and then putting a LUT on to have a purpose. Like I showed you with this clip here, adding this infrared LUT onto the footage gave it this really nice stylized look, but if I add it to any of the other clips without knowing what this LUT is going to do or where it can be used, then it's just going to end up making my footage look not very nice. So pay attention to what you're actually doing, try and learn as best you can to do it yourself, and then begin to use LUTs where you can. But if you are interested in purchasing any of the LUTs that I used in this video, all of them will be linked in the description below for you guys to go download and use. If you enjoyed this video, if you've enjoyed any of the videos that I've been putting out on my channel, I would really appreciate if you could like and subscribe. But as always, it's entirely up to you, and I'll see you guys next time.